Hey everybody, it is You Had to Ask, the show where I answer your questions, and if you notice a bit more background noise in this video than is typical for me, that's because I have a window open right over there and a fan going. I apologize, but it is, I believe the technical meteorological term is fucking hot. So, bear with me. Anyway, my first question comes from Ohoyerno, who says, question, do you tip and how much? I used not to believe in tipping, but after learning what service people earn, I started tipping a lot. I mean, as an engineer, I earn more than enough, and on New Year's Eve, someone was massaging me for less than $5 per hour. I felt really bad and literally tipped her 100%. Normally, I stick to 10% rounded up for change. In Germany, tipping is not required, so 10% is quite a lot. Yes, I do tip. I try to tip as generously as I can afford on any given occasion. Here in the U.S., the usual standard is 15%. That's considered good tipping etiquette to tip 15%. I usually go for about 18% or 20%, and I feel bad if I can't tip that much. It's very important to me to tip generously because usually people who work at a job where tips are customarily accepted don't get paid very much. If they're very, very lucky, they get paid minimum wage. And in most cases, especially if you're a server in a restaurant, you actually don't even get minimum wage. You get minimum wage weighed against your tips. So yeah, people rely on the tips, and it's very important. And their job is so hard. I would never want to be a waiter, ever. I would never want to clear dishes from a table. I would never want to work a grill or do any of the, cut people's hair. Please, if you get a haircut, tip your hairstylist or your barber. What a shitty job. Yeah, tipping is very important to me, and I think you should tip generously. Mr. John 136, what are your thoughts on the films of Hayao Miyazaki? Secondly, why do you believe so many people flock to ask you such personal questions through these videos? You are certainly a very warm and likable personality, but that doesn't fully explain why so many put their baggage up for the world to see, or at least your subscribers to get your opinion. Well, to answer the first question first, I am a huge admirer of Hayao Miyazaki. For those of you who aren't familiar with him, he's a director of anime, and he's the guy who did Princess Mononoke, and I think Kiki's Delivery Service, Howl's Moving Castle, Spirited Away. He's just a genius. He makes wonderful, wonderful movies. Princess Mononoke and Spirited Away, in particular, are two of the best animated films I've ever seen. So I'm a huge fan of Miyazaki. I'm a great admirer of him. As for why do people ask me such personal questions, I don't know. I guess maybe I seem like a likable guy. I try not to be judgmental too much. I try to take people as I find them, and I don't think, unless somebody says something that I find just, truly offensive to the bottom of my being, something bigoted or something like that, I'm usually pretty easy on people. I try not to embarrass people. I try to be sensitive to what I perceive as their issues or what they're dealing with. And you know what? As far as asking advice from a sort of a public source in general, I'm of the opinion that a lot of people who ask advice in public, whether it's to some idiot with a YouTube channel or to an advice column or calling into a radio show or whatever, I think very often people already have an idea of what they want to do or what they think they should do. They just need to hear somebody else say it. And I think that sort of allows us to give ourselves permission. So if someone asks me a question, what should I do about this? What's your advice about this? And they already have an idea formed in their head of what they think they might want to do. And then they hear me say something similar to that in response to their question. That gives them permission to act on it. That gives them permission to say, okay, that sounds good. I now have feedback from another person who is relatively objective to my situation, who says that this is a good idea to it. I think a lot of it is that. And in that sense, making it a public thing or asking someone who you don't know very well personally, but you have some access to, like me, can actually be helpful with that. You can see if you're on the right track. You can see if another person removed from your situation sees things the way you do. And a lot of people find that helpful and find that reassuring. Reltzik, you are offered a choice as screenwriter for 2 different projects by major Hollywood producers, and for scheduling reasons you can only work on one. One project is to pick your favorite obscure comic book character, team, or series and write the first installment of a potential franchise to popularize him, her, them, or it. The second project is to write an Inherit the Wind style dramatization of the Dover trial, with the judge as the protagonist. Which job do you take and why? For as huge of a nerd as I am, and for as big of a fan of superheroes as I am, it's tough to say I wouldn't take the superhero job, but I think I would take the Dover trial job, because I feel like that's probably a better use of my talents, such as they are. I think even though I love superheroes and I love talking about them and I love seeing superhero movies and reading superhero comics and I'm just a huge superhero geek, I think as a writer and as a storyteller, I am better suited to more down-to-earth stories. And I'm really intrigued. Actually, that's a really good suggestion, doing like an Inherit the Wind sort of dramatization of the Dover creationism trial. I think that's actually a really good idea. I wish somebody would make that movie. And yeah, if given those 2 offers, I would probably take the Dover trial one. Also, because the other thing is, superhero movies, as much as I love them, they are living on borrowed time. I hope that the bubble doesn't burst before we get to the 2-part mega Avengers movie, the Infinity Wars movie. But if it doesn't burst before then, it will burst right then. We're going to reach critical mass very shortly, in the next several years, on superhero movies. We're going to reach the saturation point, and then that genre, I think, will really kind of mellow out and kind of take, will come down in the world, at least for a while. So just in the interest not only of utilizing my talents, such as they are, to the best of my ability, but also job security, I will choose the Dover trial instead of the superhero movie. William Wright, what do you think are some of the most progressive TV shows or movies in terms of social justice, representations of minorities, political ideologies, etc.? It's both impressive and embarrassing, but even after all these years, I still am hard-pressed to think of a more progressive television show, at least in American television, than All in the Family. Not just because of the particular politics that it put forward, which were liberal and progressive, even though the main character, Archie, was a very conservative guy and not progressive at all. The politics of the show were very liberal and very forward-thinking, very progressive. And the fact that it was so bold about it, it was so overt, it was clearly a primary function of the show to tell very, very strongly political stories with a particular point of view, without being simplistic, without whitewashing things, without straw-manning the other side, but telling political stories with a very serious, specific point of view. And also, it was a comedy, and it was a hilarious comedy. It's one of my favorite shows ever, and even 40 years since its heyday, it's hard to think of another show that was as politically and socially progressive and as upfront about it as All in the Family. It's one of the ballsiest shows I've ever seen, still to this day. So that would definitely be at the top of my list. Captain Michael, hi Steve. Do you think there will ever be a future for the men's rights movement, or MRAs, which is not extremist, sexist, misogynist, apologist for horrible attitudes, etc., that deals with the problems facing men without the baggage which the current movement has? It would have to be a completely different movement. It would have to completely reject not just the arguments of the current men's rights movement. It would have to reject the entire warped worldview of the men's rights movements, because most prominent, outspoken MRAs are not just people who are interested in men's issues. They see the world in this upside down way that has women as the dominant privileged gender and men as the oppressed underprivileged gender. And I'm sorry, that's just not the way it is. That is an exact inversion of reality. So for a men's rights movement to sort of come up and throw off the extremism and the bigotry of the current men's rights movement, it will not only have to do away with the sort of hateful rhetoric and the self-pity and the projection and the insecurity and the objectification of women and all the things that make the men's rights movement so repugnant. It will also have to reorient its worldview, its view of reality to match reality. We'll have to accept the fact that even though there are legitimate men's issues, and even though there are certainly times when men should be stood up for and should be spoken up for, the overall state of our culture, of our society, is men are here and women are here. That's just the way it is. And that will have before they accept that, I don't know how they can possibly become anything other than what they are. Brad Baumander, hey Steve, keeping on the topic of female characters, what was so bad about Black Widow? I thought she was smart, strong, capable. She didn't participate in the macho, tough guy posturing, trying to pick up Thor's hammer. If it's about Scarlett Johansson in the cat suit, well, it's a Hollywood action movie. Everybody's sexy in them, female and male. I did not personally have a huge problem with how she was portrayed, although I did, when I heard the complaints from certain people, I understood them and I recognized what they were talking about in the movie. Like, I didn't think those people were crazy. I saw what they saw in the movie. But personally, I didn't think it was that big of a deal. The only major problem I had with Black Widow's characterization was when I compare how she was used in Avengers Age of Ultron to how she was used in the first Avengers movie. I feel like the first Avengers movie did a better job of setting her up as a unique and special member of the team. She had certain talents, the way she would interrogate people, the way she would sort of tease information out of people without them realizing they were divulging things. That made her unique on the team, that sort of justified her being there even though she didn't have superpowers and she wasn't, from another realm and she couldn't press things over her head. Like, there was an element of her character that made it seem like she was a unique and essential part of the team. And there was not as much of that in Avengers Age of Ultron. She was a great action hero, she kicked ass, she had cool gadgets, she was involved in really exciting action scenes. But she was not as unique a member of the team in terms of her role on the team as she was in the first one. So that was the only major complaint I had about her from my point of view. But I understood what other people thought and what other people said made her problematic in Age of Ultron. I just didn't, those complaints didn't occur to me while I was watching the movie. Cranes Not Skyhooks. Hey Steve, you've described yourself as a big Quentin Tarantino fan, so I have to ask, why? I've seen the big four, Dogs, Fiction, Bastards, and Django, and didn't like any of them, but I particularly hated Django, with the gratuitous violence, the long-winded dialogue, the cartoony characters, and the childish insensitivity towards serious issues like slavery and the Holocaust. I just don't understand why Tarantino is so acclaimed. I don't mean to sound hostile or rude, I'm genuinely curious, and I'm hoping that the answer is more than just, well, I find him funny or good, etc., and you don't. Thanks. Oh, I don't take it as hostile. You're allowed to like or not like whatever you want. Just because I think Tarantino is great doesn't mean I'm going to think you're some kind of a prick if you don't like him. It's hard to describe. I do think he's funny. I do think often his dialogue is very good, very clever. I see what you're saying about long-winded. There are times when he has characters go into these sort of soliloquies that feels kind of self-indulgent. Feels like he almost thinks of his dialogue as music. In fact, I think he's described it from time to time in terms not unlike that. And I understand that could get old for some people if you're not like a total Tarantino fanboy. But to me, there's just something about the way he makes a film, about his style, and I'm speaking his visual style. He's been described very often by his admirers as a very kinetic filmmaker. His films are just exciting. He knows how to move things. He knows how to shoot things. He knows where to put the camera. He knows how to move the camera. He knows how to edit to have a perfect pace for an action scene. He knows how to build suspense. He executes fundamental aspects of filmmaking with great efficiency and with great flair and great personal style. Even if you don't listen to the dialogue, you can watch a movie and you can tell that it's a Tarantino film. And there's just a sense of the joy of filmmaking. There's a sense of, this is a guy who loves movies, who has devoted his entire life to them, and has the skill, both as a writer and as a director, as a visual stylist, to translate that joy and that love of movies onto the screen so that you can see it as an audience member as well as he can see it and share it as a filmmaker. And maybe you don't get that. Maybe you just don't get that. It doesn't come across to you, but it comes across to me, and I really connect with it and really appreciate it. A really great Tarantino film is not just a movie that has good action or clever dialogue or well-staged fight scenes or, a complex storyline or whatever. A good Tarantino film is a movie that not only does it work on its own merit as a film, but it serves almost as a celebration of cinema itself. A good Tarantino film is a celebration of the storytelling art form of movies. And I think that's why people who really love him and really love his work respond to it so strongly, because they get that sense that it's not just a movie, it's a celebration of the movies in general. Joe7 Buer Genwader 2. What are your thoughts on what I like to call amateur patriotism? I'm a veteran and I love my country, but am not particularly moved by flags and national anthems. In fact, it kind of bothers me that seemingly most people in America define their patriotism by these things. There is big support for a law to make it illegal to disrespect or desecrate the American flag, which I find to be blatantly fascist and ironic on a number of levels. Have people forgotten why being able to do this is a part of what makes America special? Well, I think part of the problem is that for many people, patriotism has become a very narrow thing and a very politicized thing. If you think about it, patriotism should not be a political statement. People of all political philosophies who have a love of their country should be able to express that love and have that be considered a form of patriotism, whether it aligns with a particular political ideology or not. And you should be able, of course, to have a critical love of your country, to be able to say, I love this place, I want what's best for this place, I love the people, I love the land, I love the government, whatever. But I see problems, and I think these problems need to be addressed. You should be able to be critical of your country and not be have your patriotism questioned or be denied the label of patriot if that is something that you want for yourself. I agree with you. I think that flags and anthems and things like that, they can be beautiful, they can have their place, they serve purposes, they're wonderful symbols, and they can be very moving if considered in the right context. But yeah, they can be superficial, and ultimately the flag is not what veterans fight for. The flag symbolizes what veterans fight for, and one of the most precious freedoms that the flag of the United States is meant to symbolize is the freedom of expression. And yeah, it is ironic that some people want to pass a law limiting someone's freedom of expression regarding the American flag when that very freedom of expression is one of the most sacred ideals represented by that flag. So, I mean, it sounds paradoxical, but it's really not if you think about it. If you're not allowed to desecrate the American flag, if you are legally prohibited from doing that, then one of the most vital freedoms represented by that flag is diminished. And therefore the flag itself as a symbol of freedom and democracy and liberty is diminished. If the flag is to mean what we want it to mean, you must be able to desecrate it. You must have that freedom. It doesn't mean you have to actually do it, but if you have a reason to do it, if you want to, you should have the freedom to do it. And if you don't have that freedom, then part of what that flag stands for is diminished. So yeah, I agree with you completely. I remember, I'm not sure how old you are, maybe you're older than I am, but I know when I was a kid, I remember there was a push to ban, desecrating the flag. And it never really went anywhere. But so it seems like this issue comes up every now and then. It's sort of it comes around every few years. People decide that it's just disgusting when people burn the flag, or when they stand on the flag, or when they do some sort of protest with the flag. And you know what? You're allowed to think it's disgusting. No one's stopping you from thinking it's disgusting. You can think it's horrible for people to desecrate the flag. You can shake your head, you can spit indignantly on the sidewalk and say, oh my God, how can they do that to this country's flag? Nobody's stopping you from saying that. But nobody should stop them from doing the thing you're angry about either. It works both ways. That's how freedom of expression works. Of course, freedom of expression doesn't guarantee that you will be able to express yourself as articulately or with as much wit and wisdom as you might hope, as much eloquence as you might hope. For instance, whenever I hear that thunderclap sound effect, I always think that I'm going to come up with something really profound and clever or funny to throw us into the next segment, and I never do. I always end up just saying, hey everybody, it's time for
the lightning round. Rapid fire questions, glib and adequate answers.
Zeppelin big fan, a wrestling question. Having watched the incredible match of the year candidate between Sasha Banks and Becky Lynch on NXT TakeOver recently, where do you see WWE going with women's wrestling and the whole give divas a chance thing? And wouldn't you just love if they stopped calling them divas? Yes, I would. I would love it if they stopped calling them divas. I would love it if they called them women like they do in NXT. But I don't see it going anywhere because I don't think Vince McMahon respects women's wrestling or cares about it. So at least as long as Vince is alive and running the show, I don't think the give divas a chance thing is going anywhere further than NXT, where the women are already kicking ass, as you said. Sabrina Loizides Meredith. Hey Steve, what are your opinions on circumcision? If you had a male child, would you circumcise him? I'm circumcised. Hope that's not too much information. I don't feel that I've been scarred by it. I don't have any regrets for it. I don't feel bad about it. But I can't really think of a reason to do it. So if I had a son, I would not have him circumcised. I just can't think of a reason to do it. Germ-free cat. If you'd been given a particular name, either first or family names, would you change it? How would you deal with the possible objections from your family? Well, I never used to like my middle name. My middle name is Clay, and it's from both my great-grandfather and my great-great-grandfather. They both had Clay as a part of their name, and I hated it when I was growing up. I really, really hated that name. But I've grown into it. I actually think it's kind of a nice name now. I would never think of changing it. So I probably wouldn't change it if I had like a really bad, embarrassing, or archaic-sounding name. I would probably leave it as it is. I would take it as part of my identity. I would just be whoever I was. But if I did decide to change it, and my family had a problem with it, they could fucking sit and spin. Because it's my name. I can call myself whatever I want. Ira Moser, which do you like better, The Simpsons or Futurama? See, this is a tough one, and I never thought I would say this, but I think I'm going to say Futurama. I think Futurama maintained a higher level of quality with greater consistency throughout its run. The Simpsons, even though I'm not a Simpsons hater and I've still enjoyed some of the later Simpsons stuff, it's definitely taken a nosedive this sort of second half of its run. And Futurama kept a pretty high level of quality throughout its run, even though it was a shorter run. So I'm going to go Futurama. Sherry Taylor. Okay, question. Bernie or Hillary? Also, which Republican do you think will win the nomination? And for comedy's sake, which one do you hope wins? Okay, between Bernie and Hillary, I would go with Hillary for multiple reasons that I'm not going to get into because it's a lightning round. I think Jeb Bush probably will win the nomination, but for comedy's sake, clearly the best choice for comedy would be a hilariously overmatched Ted Cruz. So just for sheer sake of comedy, I'm kind of rooting for Ted. But yeah, I think it's going to be Jeb. Chris Abbey. Now, just because I've watched everything on your channel, you wouldn't think I'm owed an answer, but because I've watched everything on your channel, you'd think I'm owed an answer. Am I right? Yes, you are right. I think it's important to appreciate people who like my stuff so much that they have watched all of my videos. I think that's important. So in a sense, I do owe you an answer. But then, on the other hand, I'm reminded of the incredibly wise words of that great sage of our time, Rocky Balboa, who was once heard to say, "Nobody owes nobody nothing. You do because you want to do." Hail Metal Forever. Hey Steve, I have a question. Where do you stand on the legalization of pot? I think it should be legal, and I think that the fact that it is illegal causes more problems than anything. Plus, any economy would obviously benefit from its legalization. Thoughts? Yeah, I agree. My position on marijuana has for years been legalize it, regulate it, and tax the shit out of it. I agree. J. Lawman DK. Hey, Steve, if you had kids, would you teach them not to swear? Why or why not? I would teach them to swear well, and I would teach them to swear intelligently, which part of that would mean knowing when to swear and when not to swear. Knowing to respect other people's sensibilities. If you're in someone's house and they don't like to hear fucks and shits flying around, to watch your language. But, you know, to use discretion, but also, if you're going to swear, to know how to do it right. That's what I would teach my kids. I would teach my kids to be articulate, including with their employment of profanity. Andy Panayotio. Boy, I butchered that, didn't I? Any particular subject or subgenre of sci-fi or fantasy you look for or enjoy? My taste in most things is very mainstream and middle of the road. So with sci-fi, I would say outer space related stuff. Stories about space exploration, space adventure, space opera, Star Trek, Star Wars type stuff. Those are the stories I gravitate to in terms of sci-fi. Outer space stuff. Isaac Estert. Have you ever answered a super important, life-changing phone call while taking a shit? No, I have not, and I'll tell you why. Because to answer a phone call while taking a shit is to deny yourself one of the greatest pleasures of taking a shit, which is that you're unavailable for phone calls. When you're on the toilet taking a shit, you shouldn't answer the phone because that's one of the few times in your life when you don't have to answer the fucking phone. Let it go to voicemail. Take a message. Call them back when you're done. Like I'm done answering your questions for another week. Before I get out of here, I'm going to give you guys a shout out. The shout out this week is an awesome one. It's one that I just recently discovered through a couple of other channels that I'm subscribed to and fans of. And the shout out this week goes to Laughing Witch. Laughing Witch gets the shout out this week because she is a feminist. She's a very strong, outspoken, awesome feminist. She talks about feminist issues. She occasionally will slap the shit out of the men's rights movement, which, as I said in a recent 5 Stupid Things video, is the only thing the men's rights movement is fucking good for, is smacking them around occasionally. She does a great job of that. Great commentary on women's issues, on culture, on issues of sexism and misogyny and all those sorts of things. Laughing Witch, a really awesome channel, very smart, articulate, wonderful voice to hear, and great videos. Laughing Witch. Highly recommended. She does great work. Check her out. Well, that's it, everybody. I'm done. I am going to go sit in front of this fan, I think, maybe, and do one of these for about 10 minutes. It's really hot. Anyway, thank you guys for watching. Please leave a comment on this video asking me your question for next time. You can ask me anything about anything. Nothing is too serious. Nothing is too silly. And I will answer as many of them as I possibly can next time. So until next time, take care, everybody.